Under Finance Budget Report, Administration will update the board on the budget. This item provides an opportunity for the board's information and discussion.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Hadn't seen me for several months, and now you've seen me twice. So that's good. Well, good evening again, President Rohde, Vice President Logan, Superintendent Thompson, Dr. Irving, members of the board. It is February, and it is high time we start talking about budget planning for fiscal year 19. I thought we'd start tonight similar to how we started last year, as far as taking a look at where we sit in the current year's budget. How is the budget performing compared to our budget plan? How do we look as we look towards basically the second half of the fiscal year? So, and for tonight's purposes, again, we're going to primarily focus on the two major funding engines that drive operations, and that's our general fund and our supplemental general fund. As of January 31st, so 7 months into the fiscal year, we have utilized 40.7% of budget authority. We have 59.3% of budget authority remaining. If you are not familiar with school finance, those would look lopsided, like it should be reversed. But if you look at our spending patterns, as we progress through the course of a fiscal year, we have a spike that occurs in June, and that is the final 3-month payout for our teachers. So we have to have enough budget authority to pay that spike that occurs in June. So if it were flipped, we would be in some trouble. But we are sitting very, very well as we're looking at trends over the past few years, looking at the past 4 years historical perspective, fiscal year 15 to 18. You can see we are right in line with where we should be at this point in the year. In fact, we are trending just maybe slightly upward, but that I think in this year we've had some transportation invoicing challenges, so I think we'll actually see that trend just a little bit back down here in the next month or so. But again, I'm very pleased that we're saying as consistent year over year means I think we're implementing a good plan. The budget is performing as expected. Everything looks to be on very solid ground at this point. And I say at this point because the budget caution here is there's still 138 days remaining of the fiscal year, where lots of different things can happen. So I'm not necessarily getting good sleep yet, but again, we're sitting in a good position, knowing that, again, we have life happens and we just have to kind of roll with what comes at us, but we are sitting very, very, very well. A reminder to the board that we, in our fiscal planning for last year, we set budget priorities. Knowing that we only were receiving, $25-ish, $28 million, we put forth a set of general priorities so we could try to focus dollars in those right places, particularly in light of the fact that we didn't know what that number was until July. So certainly recruitment and retention through compensation was kind of our first and foremost priority, and then a whole list of things that we knew needed attention, and that was somewhat how we tried to develop our budget process for fiscal year 18, and I think we did a pretty good job of putting dollars in as many places as we could, knowing that it goes pretty fast. In the improved salary structure for recruitment and retention, certainly that was a primary focus for us this year. It is where the bulk of new money went. But certainly we have spent some dollars in other areas where we have some significant lift, including implementing a social emotional trauma team at the elementary level, creating the homework hotline, tutoring programs at middle and high, expanded learning centers, funding for the Jobs for American Graduates at the high school level, and then some technology purchases, and then the individual plans of study, just to kind of name some of the bigger items that where our budget focus was. So I think we're going to be able to provide you some more data as we get a little further in the year as far as how have these investments paid off for us. So, but overall, I think we did a pretty good job of addressing as many areas as we could within that initial budget priority list. And as we move forward into fiscal year 19 budget planning, the timing of this is going to be interesting because Dr. Thompson laid out your timeline for work on your strategic plan, that you're going to have several budget workshops, and you'll be in that April, May, June timeframe for kind of having a completed product. That's probably a little bit too late for me related to the actual budget itself. We're going to have to identify our fixed costs, and we're going to have to kind of have some planning around where we're going to spend money so that we're ready for budget forms when they hit us in July. So we're going to want maybe a list for fiscal year 19 of budget, of kind of revised budget priorities, so that we can build that budget with our plan for fiscal year 20, looking at how does budget really fit around the strategic plan as opposed to budget driving how we're spending our funds, letting the plan drive the budget. So that's going to be a real shift for us. It's going to be exciting work, I think, a lot of conversations that will need to be happening. But for fiscal year 19, we're probably going to be just a little bit off on timing, where we're not going to be able to really kind of put that budget completely around a strategic plan. We'll probably do again that, where are your priorities? We'll build that budget plan, we'll get those forms done, and then we'll kind of align as we move through the course of the fiscal year with a plan of really wrapping budget around the strategic plan for fiscal year 20. And you know, I love my clip arts, but again, the budget planning challenges for us this year, again, are surrounding the legislative action. So our Gannon 5 decision in October basically laid it back in the legislature's lap that they needed to fix both adequacy and equity out of the new school finance formula. So March 15th is the due date for a cost study that the legislature has requested, identifying if schools actually need additional funding. They've ordered their own cost study. The other studies they felt were too old. So they have an expert that is supposed to have the report released by March 15th. There's not a lot of days before then a response to the court is due. Briefs are due April 30th. I believe that's 32 legislative days in there that they have to take action between the report and the briefs being due. May 10th, response briefs are due. May 22nd, oral arguments will be conducted, and then the court has promised a decision by June 30th. So you can see this year is going to slightly align to what we went through last year, and that we're going to be kind of having to wait a little bit to see, is there money? Most likely, because there's money already in the formula, but the formula is not adequate nor equitable, so what will be the changes to the formula? And I think you can see that we'll be waiting again till the last probably possible second. And then depending on what happens on June 30th, will we need a special session when the court makes its decision, and then what happens. So again, a lot of unknowns at this point as we're looking at the budget planning process into the summer, but I would say it's probably going to align pretty closely with last year. And just a reminder that our budgets are due August 25th, so that is kind of our due date. So what are our fiscal year 19 budget planning next steps? Certainly, we're going to keep a close eye on legislative action. It's going to be very important as we move forward to be very informed of what is happening. And in both the House and the Senate, there's a lot of bills out there related to education. So we're going to keep a close eye on all of that action. We'll need that fiscal year 19 budget priority list. So certainly, as you're working on your strategic plans, hopefully that list develops out of that work, and you'll be able to provide some guidance to us as we're building our plan for 19. And then we'll start to collect our data on all the fixed cost increases that we know and can identify, the usual players will be on the list, utilities, certainly the calendar change. There'll be some items we can easily identify and start to put some dollars around those. So kind of to recap our budget opener, if you will, fiscal year 18 budget proceeding according to plan. Looks very solid. The fiscal year 18 priorities set by the BOE were, for the most part, I think we followed those well, and progress was made towards those priorities. Fiscal year 19 budget planning will again begin without a finalized funding formula, but planning can be done, and certainly we'll want to plan around those revised priorities. And that's our budget opener, and I'll stand for questions.
Well, if you quickly run, you can get away because there's no questions.
Yay.
Hang on, Cheryl has one.
I just have one quick one, because you mentioned the budget priorities, the list that the board had set last year, and that you would need another one because probably the legislature is going to run late. What's kind of your timeline on that for us?
I think after looking at the workshop dates that you have, I think we're going to be really pretty closely aligned to that date. So if you have your kind of work done in that April timeframe, that should be a pretty good timeline for me.
Good. That would work, because that means no extra meetings.
Right. That's how I see it.
No extra meetings. Ernestine,
Well, this August 25th budget due, what happens if the courts and the legislature tangle in the summer?
You know, we did run into that a little bit last summer. We
Yes.
were a couple days past the due date, but we communicated with the county ahead of time that we would be a day or two late, and life went on. But the goal is to make the August 25th date. Certainly, the reason is the county needs to get those our mill levies, published and in their
Right.
systems and all of that out to taxpayers. So certainly, having that information as quickly to Sedgwick County as we can is our goal. A day or two is not the end of the world, but certainly past that becomes a little bit more problematic. We're going to be cautiously optimistic that everyone will do what they need to do in order for a new funding formula to pass timely.
I like your
Yes.
optimism. May I assume that we therefore can assure the parents that schools won't be shut just because we don't make the August 25th date within
It won't be, the August 25th date will not be the issue. The
Okay.
issue will be more likely back into the June 30th date and what happens at that point.
That's true. Thank you.
Julie,
Susan, I just want to say thank you. You do an excellent job giving us this information, and with the moving target, keeping us on task. You've done great with the board before, so I'm confident that we're in good hands. So thank you very much for your work.
Ben,
Ma'am, so it's my understanding that the priorities list that we will work on and present will be the focus of any new monies received, possibly?
Right. What we did last year was, we had a standard fixed cost number of items that we have to cover. So if our electric rate is going to go up by an estimated 3 to 5%, we have to cover that. If our transportation contract has an inflationary factor in it, we have to cover those type of expenses. So once those are identified and costed, then once we have an idea of what money will be coming at us based on enrollment and our weightings, we factor out those fixed costs. Then we have, here's what's left as far as new budget authority and where should those dollars be focused. Obviously, to our staff, in as far as recruitment and compensation is important. Improving student performance as far as graduation rates and those kind of key pillar programs were a big focus for us this year. So again, without a strategic plan, this was kind of our next best way to wrap budget around where the district needs to focus additional dollars, so that we get some lift and we're able to go back and say, okay, you gave us these additional monies, here's what we did with them that meets the goals set out not only by the district, but then also by the legislature. So we wanted to have that very strong reporting angle so that we can report back to our taxpayers and certainly the legislature that this is what we're doing with the money.
Is it within the realm of possibility that we might have to make cuts? And should we, in that circumstance, prepare a plan for that potentiality?
The formula itself, so Senate Bill 19, has an increase for the base aid amount already built in. So our base aid is $4,006 per student for the fiscal year 18 school year. It goes to $41.28 in fiscal year 19. If they didn't already have that piece as far as an increase to the base in its existing formula, then I think that cut possibility would be a little bit more, possible, but possibility being possible. Likely, maybe. But in this case, where we already have an increase to the base in the plan, and the court has said that's not enough, I think we're probably not looking at a cut situation. It's just, will we only get that much funding, or will there be additional dollars? Certainly, the fiscal state of our state budget is solid. The state has beat revenue projections so far, so these are all positive signs that we're not probably going to be in a cut situation. That's, if I have to look in my crystal ball, that's what my crystal ball says, is that we're probably safe from a cut mode. It's just a matter of, will it be $20 million? Will it be $10 million? Will it be $5 million? Will it be, I don't know what that final number will be. So our plans will be, if we get this, we'll do this. If we get X, we'll do this.
Thank you, ma'am.
I don't see any other questions. We'll see you next time.
All right.